Hello, my friend. Good evening. Have you ever wondered how the world truly began? What it was like in that moment when nothing existed? No light, no wind, no moon, no sun, no gods, not even life had stirred. It is strange to imagine, isn't it? A universe without sound, without shape, just an endless silent expanse stretching beyond imagination. Tonight, I want to show you a place so ancient, so mysterious that even imagination hesitates to enter. A mysterious world hidden before the beginning of time, where the first spark of creation quietly flickered. If you enjoy stories that awaken curiosity, if ancient gods and forgotten mysteries draw you, then stay close, because what you are about to hear is not just fiction. It is the echo of the world's first heartbeat. Turn down the lights. Let the fan whisper softly. Allow the outside world to fade away. Rest your head, let your thoughts settle, and open your mind. If you enjoy this history-based work of mine, then subscribe to my channel, give a like, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Then let us lose ourselves in that world of mystery.
The birth of the cosmos. Before the dawn of time, before the whisper of wind, before even the concept of earth or sky existed, there was only chaos. Not chaos as we know it in our cities, in our bustling lives, but a vast, yawning emptiness, pregnant with possibility. It was neither evil nor good, neither light nor dark. It simply was. Within this primordial void stirred the seeds of all things to come, subtle tremors in the fabric of nothingness that would shape the destiny of the universe. From the depths of this infinite emptiness emerged the first forces of reality. Gaia, the earth, rose vast and immovable, a foundation upon which the future would be built. Her presence was serene yet powerful, the embodiment of endurance and stability. Below her stretched Tartarus, a chasm so deep and dreadful that the mind recoiled at the thought of its abyss. It was the womb of the world's dark mysteries, the uncharted void beneath all things. And then came Eros, not the tender love of humans, but the raw force of desire and attraction that would weave all elements together, the invisible thread binding existence itself. From the union of chaos and the first elemental forces appeared Nyx, night, draped in shadows so thick that even chaos seemed to shrink before her. She was the first embodiment of darkness, a presence absolute and absolute alone. Alongside her came Erebus, the darkness of the underworld, silent and eternal. Together, night and darkness formed a duality, a pattern that would echo endlessly through the cosmos, a reminder that for every force there must be its counterpart. From their union arose ether, the bright, rarefied air above, the breath that gods would one day inhale, and Hemera, day, who was fated from the beginning to chase her mother across the heavens, establishing the eternal rhythm of light and shadow. In these first moments, the universe began to pulse with life, a cosmic heartbeat driven by the interplay of opposites. As the cosmos unfolded, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, the sky, stretching in limitless majesty above her. His union with the earth produced the first Titans, beings of immense power and presence, whose forms mirrored the vastness and wonder of the world itself. Oceanus, Coeus, Krios, Hyperion, Iapetus,
names that would echo for eternity, emerged as the primal forces shaping rivers, stars, and mountains. Their sisters, Theia, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, and Tethys, complemented their power, weaving threads of order into the burgeoning chaos of creation. Yet even in these first generations, the dynamics of ambition and fear appeared. Uranos, fearing the prophecy that he would be overthrown by his children, imprisoned them deep within Gaia's womb, hiding the future within the earth itself. This act of suppression, however, could not go unchallenged. Gaia, mother of all, conceived a plan and entrusted it to her youngest Titan son, Kronos, cunning and bold. With a sickle forged from her essence, Kronos struck Uranos, separating sky from earth. From the blood that fell upon the land came beings of extraordinary and terrifying power: the Furies, spirits of vengeance; the Giants, embodiments of raw might; and the Meleae, spirits of the ash tree, marking the start of creation's complex tapestry. Through this first act of rebellion, the cycle of birth, power, and transformation began. The Titans rose to prominence, shaping the rivers, mountains, and stars with their hands. Yet, for every act of creation, there were shadows of rebellion and whispers of destiny. Even as the Titans ruled, the seeds of future Olympians were quietly sown, and the cosmos was set on a path that would lead to love, war, betrayal, and heroism. Mortals, though not yet born in flesh and blood, began to stir in essence. Thoughts and potentialities of humanity shimmered within the universe, sparks ignited by the divine interplay of forces. These first inklings of man carried the promise of curiosity, ambition, and mortality, qualities that would later shape myths, legends, and epic tales. From these sparks, heroes and mortals would one day emerge, their destinies intertwined with the gods who ruled the skies and the earth. Thus, the stage of existence was set. Chaos had birthed form, shadow had birthed light, and from the depths of silence, the universe began its eternal symphony. Titans governed vast domains, the earth thrummed with life, and the sky stretched infinite above it. It was a beginning without end, a story whose threads would weave through time itself. Even now, when we look at the mountains, feel the wind, or watch the stars, we are witnessing echoes of this first epoch. The first night, the first day, the first act of defiance, they all resonate still, whispering the eternal rhythm of creation. From chaos came everything, and every myth, every story, every act of heroism or heartbreak can trace its roots to that primal void, that infinite potential, that first spark of existence.
The rise of the Titans. After the violent birth of the cosmos, the universe settled into a rhythm of power, shadow, and light. The first rulers of this new world were the Titans, children of Gaia and Uranus, each embodying aspects of the natural and the divine. They were immense, powerful, eternal, beings whose very presence shaped the earth, sky, and seas. Oceanus, the endless river encircling the world. Coeus, the pillar of intellect and foresight. Crius, representing the constellations. Hyperion, whose gaze illuminated the heavens. Iapetus, the mortal-linked ancestor of men. And their sisters, Theia, the brilliance of sight and shining light. Rhea, the comforting mother. Themis, embodiment of divine law. Mnemosyne, the essence of memory. Phoebe, the oracle of prophecy. And Tethys, guardian of the nourishing waters.
Together they ruled the first age, a golden age, when existence hummed in balance and potential. Cronus, the youngest and most cunning of the Titans, was aware of a prophecy whispered by Gaia herself. One of your children will overthrow you, as you overthrew your father. The words echoed in his mind like the distant rumble of thunder, a warning that fate itself would not bend to desire. Fear and ambition stirred within him, twin flames that consumed the serenity of the Golden Age. The prophecy did not only predict danger, it demanded action. Cronus could not allow time to create a rival. He would seize destiny before destiny seized him. As the ages flowed, Rhea bore children: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and finally Zeus. Each birth should have been a blessing, a continuation of the universe's unfolding harmony. Yet Cronus, gripped by paranoia, swallowed each child at birth, trapping them in his endless stomach. The earth trembled under the weight of his actions. Gaia cried silently from within, for the cycle of creation could not be stifled forever. Life yearned to rise, and even a Titan's might could not halt it. Rhea, desperate to save her youngest, Zeus, devised the plan. On a storm-darkened night, in a hidden cave of Crete, she brought forth her son and concealed him from Cronus. She offered Cronus a swaddled stone, wrapped in infant's clothing, which he swallowed unknowingly. The deception allowed Zeus to grow in secret, nourished by divine goat Amalthea, hidden in the winding labyrinth of caves. Meanwhile, the whispers of fate began to stir within the cosmos. The winds carried rumors of rebellion, and even the Titans sensed the tremor of coming change. As Zeus matured, the Golden Age continued to unfold unevenly. The Titans maintained the physical and cosmic order, shaping oceans, rivers, mountains, and stars. But within the halls of power, tension simmered. Cronus's rule, though absolute, was shadowed by fear and suspicion. Every act of creation was tinged with anxiety, for even the most magnificent empire cannot endure when the ruler dreads his own legacy. The prophecy was a storm cloud hovering over the Titan domain, and every Titan, knowingly or not, contributed to its gathering force. Meanwhile, Zeus, hidden and nurtured, absorbed knowledge of the universe's rhythm and power. In secret, he learned of his siblings trapped within Cronus's body, of the Golden Age's fragile perfection, and of the inevitable confrontation looming on the horizon. The universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the day when rebellion would ignite. The cave where Zeus grew became a crucible of preparation, where wisdom and strength coalesced, shaping him into a god destined to challenge fate itself. During this epoch, the mortals of the world began to emerge as well, shaped not only by the Titans, but by the hidden influences of the divine. These first humans walked forests untouched by sorrow, drank from rivers pure and endless, and lived in harmony with the rhythms of nature. The Titans, unaware of the hidden defiance brewing, influenced human life indirectly. Oceanus taught the flow of waters. Hyperion illuminated the skies. Themis offered the principles of order and justice. Mnemosyne whispered the first inklings of memory, history, and learning. Humans were the quiet observers of divine politics, the small flickers of consciousness in a vast universe ruled by forces beyond comprehension. Yet even in the midst of peace, subtle signs of future conflict appeared. The cosmos itself hinted at imbalance. Minor rebellions among the Titans, disagreements over dominion, and whispers of forbidden knowledge circulated in the cosmic winds. The earth shivered with anticipation, Every mountain, river, and star seemed to pulse with the rhythm of coming war. These early tensions were invisible to mortals, yet they would shape the very fabric of destiny, laying the foundation for a universe where power, love, and vengeance intertwined inexorably. Rhea's act of hiding Zeus was more than mere survival. It was the first spark of change in the world of gods. It signified that even the mightiest rulers are vulnerable to prophecy, that fear and ambition cannot permanently suppress the flow of destiny. Zeus's hidden years allowed him to understand the balance of power, the necessity of cunning and courage, and the weight of responsibility that would accompany his eventual rise. And so, as the golden age of Titans continued in its fragile majesty, the first murmurs of rebellion stirred. A hidden god was growing, one who would challenge the might of the old order, one who would bring a new era of power and possibility. The cosmos, silent yet vigilant, seemed to wait with bated breath for the day when prophecy would be fulfilled, when fear and ambition would clash, and when the hidden child of Rhea would step into his destiny. Thus, the rise of the Titans was not only a story of immense power and order, it was also a prelude to change, a delicate balance of creation and fear, of cosmic rule and inevitable rebellion. Every river, mountain, and star shaped by their hands would soon witness the unfolding of events that would reshape Olympus itself. From the hidden shadows of Crete to the farthest reaches of the universe, the threads of fate were weaving a story that would echo across eternity, setting the stage for gods, heroes, and mortals alike. The Golden Age, magnificent and eternal in appearance, carried within it the seeds of upheaval. The prophecy lingered like a quiet storm, waiting for the moment to strike. And in the caves of Crete, the hidden Zeus grew, unknowing of the vast destiny that awaited him, but already embodying the potential to challenge the cosmos itself, and to bring the first glimmers of hope, cunning, and change into a universe ruled by fear.
The Titanomachy, War of the Gods. The universe, shaped by chaos and ordered by the first Titans, had known a fragile peace. Mountains rose, rivers flowed, stars shimmered, all according to the design of the great Titans. But hidden beneath the surface of this golden age, a quiet storm was gathering. For in secret, Zeus, the child of Rhea, had grown strong, wise, and aware of the injustice done to his siblings. He had heard the whispers of prophecy, and with each passing day his resolve hardened. The age of Titans, magnificent though it was, must give way to a new era. The moment of confrontation arrived with a thunderous inevitability. Zeus, now fully grown and commanding divine strength, emerged from his secret refuge in Crete. The earth trembled under his footsteps. The winds carried his arrival across the mountains and seas. Cronus, ever vigilant, sensed a stirring of rebellion, but even he could not know the full extent of what was coming. With Zeus's cunning and the wisdom passed down by Gaia, a plan was set in motion, a rebellion against the very rulers of the universe. Zeus was not alone. Allies from unexpected corners joined his cause. The Cyclops, ancient craftsmen of unimaginable skill, offered weapons forged with lightning, thunder, and raw power. The Hecatonchires, hundred-handed giants, pledged their might to Zeus's side. Even some Titans, disillusioned with Cronus's tyranny, quietly took positions in support of the young god. The cosmic chessboard was set, each piece moving with silent tension, waiting for the signal that would ignite war.
The Titanomachy, as this war would come to be known, was unlike any battle the universe had ever witnessed. Mountains quaked as colossal beings clashed. Lightning tore through the sky, a reflection of Zeus's wrath and might. Rivers boiled and seas roared, responding to the fury unleashed upon them. The very fabric of reality seemed to tremble under the power of gods, titans, and giants locked in a struggle for dominance. Cronus, mighty yet fearful, summoned his loyal titans, Oceanus, Coeus, Crius, Hyperion, Iapetus, and their sisters, each commanding a domain of immense power. Yet even among them cracks of doubt appeared, some weary of tyranny, or seduced by Zeus's promise of a new order, hesitated. The tension was palpable, betrayal and strategy intertwined in a dangerous dance. Each clash of cosmic power was a story in itself, a saga of might, will, and destiny. Amid this chaos, mortals and minor gods felt the tremors of war. Though invisible to human eyes, their lives were shaped by the conflict above. The forests whispered of shifting power. Rivers carried stories of divine struggle to every corner of the earth. The mortal heart, fragile yet enduring, beat in rhythm with the battles of immortals, sensing perhaps that the fate of the universe would soon determine the fate of humanity itself. The battles raged for 10 years, a cosmic decade of fire, lightning, and unrelenting fury. Titans hurled mountains. Zeus's thunderbolts split the sky. Hecatontures, with their 100 hands, struck in overwhelming force, changing the tide of war. Cyclops crafted weapons of such potency that even the mightiest titans could not resist their impact. The universe itself became the battlefield, a stage for epic conflict where every star and river bore witness to divine struggle. Cronus, despite his power, began to falter. His fear, once a source of control, became a weakness. Prophecy loomed over him like a storm cloud, and even his most loyal allies could not hold against the tide of destiny. Zeus's leadership, combined with strategic cunning and the loyalty of new allies, turned the war in favor of the Olympians. One by one, titans fell or were imprisoned, their reign of dominance shattered by the storm of rebellion. The victory of Zeus and his siblings marked the dawn of a new era, the era of the Olympians. It was an era of rule, yes, but also of possibility, where gods interacted with mortals, heroes could rise, and destinies could be challenged. The stage was set for epic tales, for love, betrayal, vengeance, and glory. Stories that would endure in the hearts and minds of humans for millennia, inspiring art, literature, and imagination across Europe, America, and the world. The Titanomachy was more than a war. It was a transformation, a forging of the universe itself. From rebellion came order, from fear came wisdom, and from struggle the beginning of stories that would echo forever. And in every clash of thunder, every tremor of the earth, and every whisper of wind across the seas, the legacy of that great conflict could still be felt, reminding all that the cosmos, though ruled by gods, was alive with stories waiting to be told. With the Titans defeated and Zeus crowned king of the gods, the universe entered a new era. The Olympians, radiant and commanding, established their dominion over the heavens, the earth, and the seas. Their rule was not merely about power, it was about order, law, and balance. The golden age of Titans had ended in thunder and fire, but the age of Olympians promised a more structured cosmos, where gods would guide the fates of mortals and the rhythm of existence itself. Zeus, wielding the mighty thunderbolt gifted to him by the Cyclopes, held authority unmatched. Yet his reign was far from simple. Leadership among gods was complex. Hera, his queen, demanded respect and influence over marriage and family. Poseidon roamed the seas with unmatched ferocity. Hades ruled the underworld with chilling precision, and Demeter nurtured the earth to ensure fertility and abundance. Even among immortals, tension and rivalry simmered beneath the surface, for the Olympians, though victorious, were not free from desire, pride, and ambition. The human world, previously untouched and nascent, now came under the subtle influence of the gods. Mortals were tiny, fragile beings, yet full of potential. They could be blessed or cursed, guided or abandoned, depending on the whims of Olympus. Prometheus, the clever Titan who had remained neutral during the Titanomachy, saw the potential in humans. He taught them survival, crafts, and the use of fire, igniting not only warmth, but knowledge, creativity, and independence. Humans began to shape the world around them, building villages, exploring forests, and cultivating the land, their every action subtly intertwined with the designs of the Olympians. The relationship between gods and mortals was complicated. Zeus, as king, sought order and reverence, yet he was prone to desire and passion, often acting unpredictably. Hera, watching over marriage, punished unfaithfulness and rewarded loyalty. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, guided heroes in their quests, instilling courage and intellect. Aphrodite, embodiment of love and desire, stirred passion and rivalry, while Ares, god of war, sowed the seeds of conflict among men. Each god left a mark on humanity, shaping civilization, morality, and ambition. Among humans, heroes began to emerge, men and women who would rise above ordinary life, guided by courage, intelligence, or divine favor. Perseus, Bellerophon, and Heracles were but the first of countless mortals destined to intertwine with gods, facing monsters, curses, and trials. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were lessons, mirrors reflecting human potential and the consequences of hubris, bravery, and devotion. Every quest, every battle, every act of cleverness or folly was a ripple in the grand tapestry woven by the Olympians. The Olympians also shaped the natural world. Rivers, mountains, forests, and seas were more than physical features. They were imbued with divine essence. Mountains echoed with the presence of gods. Rivers whispered prophecies to those who listened. Forests hid nymphs and spirits, guardians of the old magic. Even animals, stars, and weather carried the signature of the divine. The cosmos was alive, pulsating with interactions between gods and mortals, myth and reality, destiny and choice. Yet even as Olympus established order, tension lingered. The defeated Titans, imprisoned in Tartarus, were not forgotten. Prophecies persisted, hinting at rebellion, vengeance, and cosmic upheaval. Mortals, though small, were not entirely passive. Their actions, pride, ambition, innovation, could challenge divine authority, and heroes often walked the delicate line between obedience and defiance. The world was a stage, and every act, no matter minor, resonated through the heavens and earth alike. Stories of the Olympians' early rule are filled with intrigue, love, and wrath. Zeus, ever the strategist, orchestrated alliances, punished rebellion, and occasionally fell prey to desire, weaving complex narratives that mortals would recount for generations. Hera, with unwavering vigilance, sought justice for wrongs, often clashing with Zeus's impulses. Poseidon's temper could summon storms, destroying ships, while Athena's wisdom guided nations and warriors towards greatness. The interplay of divine personalities created drama, tension, and spectacle, making every event a story worth remembering. As centuries passed, mortals advanced, inspired or challenged by the gods. Cities arose, civilizations flourished, and myths became integral to culture. Festivals, rituals, and temples celebrated the Olympians, ensuring their stories were preserved not just in memory, but in tangible practice. These early interactions between mortals and gods set the stage for epic narratives, quests, wars, loves, betrayals, and triumphs that would define Greek mythology for millennia. The age of Olympians was more than rule. It was a foundation for storytelling, culture, and human imagination. The cosmos, alive with divine presence, became a theater where mortals and gods performed roles of heroism, folly, and destiny. Even natural phenomena, the sunrise, storms, or earthquakes, were perceived as extensions of divine will, reminding humans that their world was shaped by powers beyond comprehension. Thus, the early reign of the Olympians marked a profound transformation. Peace and order replaced the chaos of the Titan Age, yet the universe remained dynamic, filled with stories, conflict, and the potential for extraordinary deeds. Mortals learned to navigate this new reality, forging identities, civilizations, and legacies intertwined with the divine. Heroes would rise, wars would rage, and the echoes of Olympus would reverberate across generations. The age of Olympians was an era of creation, guidance, and the intricate dance between the mortal and divine. It was the beginning of myth as we know it, a world where gods shaped reality, heroes defied odds, and every story carried the weight of eternity. For Europe, America, and beyond, these tales would become timeless, inspiring imagination, art, and culture, reminding all that in the interplay between mortals and immortals lies the heart of every legend. The birth of heroes and the dawn of mortals' legends. As the Olympians established their dominion over the cosmos, the world of mortals began to stir with life, ambition, and potential. The age of Olympians was not merely a time of divine rule. It was the era in which humans, tiny yet extraordinary, would rise to shape history, legend, and myth. Guided, challenged, and occasionally punished by the gods, mortals began their first heroic journeys, carving names that would echo across eternity. Prometheus, the clever and foresighted Titan, had watched humanity with both concern and admiration. Unlike many of his kind, he did not seek power over mortals. Instead, he saw in them the spark of creativity, intelligence, and resilience. He brought them the gift of fire, not merely as warmth or light, but as a symbol of civilization. With fire, humans learned to cook, to craft, to forge tools, and to build shelters. Their minds awakened alongside the flames, and with knowledge came responsibility, ambition, and the first whispers of heroism. The Olympians, while proud of their own dominion, could not ignore the mortal world. Zeus, ever vigilant, observed humanity with a mixture of curiosity and authority. Some humans were blessed with divine favor. Others suffered wrath, punishment, or trials. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, guided the clever, the courageous, and the curious. She inspired inventors, tacticians, and warriors, instilling insight into the human heart. Aphrodite, with her subtle sway over love and desire, stirred passion, rivalry, and unexpected alliances among mortals. Meanwhile, Ares brought conflict and courage, testing mortals against one another, against beasts, and against themselves. From this divine interaction emerged the first heroes, individuals whose deeds would shape the mortal imagination for generations. Perseus, destined to slay the monstrous Medusa, exemplified courage tempered with cunning. Bellerophon, tamer of Pegasus, conquered impossible trials through ingenuity and bravery. These early heroes faced monsters born from the chaotic remnants of the Titan Age, serpentine horrors, vengeful spirits, and creatures twisted by divine influence. Each confrontation was not merely a test of strength, but a crucible for character, teaching mortals and gods alike about courage, wit, and consequence. Yet with great power came the peril of hubris. Many mortals, intoxicated by gifts of the gods or their own cunning, overstepped boundaries. They challenged divine authority, flaunted laws, and sought glory at any cost. Prometheus himself became a subtle rebel. His love for humanity led him to act against Zeus's decrees. By giving fire and knowledge, he empowered humans to think, create, and question, but also to defy. Hubris, the fatal flaw of ambition, became a recurring theme, a warning whispered in myths that would be retold across generations in Europe, America, and beyond. The interactions between gods and mortals created a delicate dance of influence, lessons, and consequences. Mortals built civilizations inspired by divine instruction or observation. Cities arose in valleys, temples perched atop hills, and festivals celebrated victories, harvests, and divine favor. These early foundations would become the backbone of culture, literature, and art in Europe and America, where myths were later recorded, dramatized, and revered. Every hero, every challenge, every divine intervention carried moral lessons, heroic inspiration, and cultural resonance. Yet, as humans advanced, the Olympians remained vigilant. Prometheus's gift of fire brought enlightenment, but also risk. Hubris and ambition persisted, and heroes occasionally fell, punished for overstepping boundaries. Mortals were fragile, yet remarkable, their potential magnified by divine influence and tempered by divine scrutiny. Each success, failure, or act of courage became a story, an enduring lesson and a source of inspiration for future generations. Thus, the age of heroes dawned within the broader reign of the Olympians. Mortals and gods intertwined, shaping destinies, myths, and civilizations. From the clever Perseus to the mighty Heracles, from cunning inventors to ambitious rulers, human potential grew alongside divine oversight. Civilization, heroism, and myth became inseparable, a tapestry of epic deeds, lessons, and adventures. The Olympians' direct involvement ensured that every mortal story was epic, every hero's journey was dramatic, and every consequence mattered. This era, filled with triumphs, tragedies, love, and vengeance, created the foundation for countless myths that would later inspire literature, art, and imagination across Europe, America, and the world. It was a world alive with possibility, where gods shaped destiny, mortals forged legends, and every story echoed the eternal interplay of power, courage, and divine will. And so, the birth of heroes and the dawn of mortals' legends set the stage for the great epics to follow. Humanity, armed with fire, intellect, and ambition, became an active participant in the cosmos, forever entwined with the divine, forever walking the line between glory and hubris, and forever at the heart of Greek mythology. The Olympians' rule and the shaping of fate. With the age of heroes dawning and mortals beginning to shape their own destiny, Olympus stood as a beacon of divine authority, power, and guidance. Zeus, seated upon his throne of storm and thunder, presided over the heavens with a mixture of wisdom, fury, and calculated mercy. The kingdom of gods was no longer just a domain of raw power. It had become a theater where personalities clashed, alliances shifted, and the threads of fate were woven into the lives of gods and mortals alike. The Olympians' rule was multifaceted. Poseidon, with his trident, ruled the seas, stirring storms or calming waves at his discretion. Hades governed the underworld, a realm of shadow and inevitability, where every soul would eventually face judgment. Athena, with her keen insight and strategic mind, guided cities, kings, and warriors, shaping civilizations through counsel and inspiration. Demeter nurtured the earth, ensuring the fertility of lands and the abundance of harvests, while her influence extended subtly into the cycles of human life, tying mortal survival to the rhythms of nature. The relationship between gods and mortals was delicate, intricate, and occasionally treacherous. Mortals revered the gods, yet their ambition often tempted them to overstep boundaries. Heroes, inspired by divine favor or challenged by divine wrath, became the instruments through which the cosmos tested courage, wisdom, and morality. Each quest, each trial, and each encounter with monsters or obstacles was a reflection of the Olympians' will, teaching humanity about obedience, courage, hubris, and resilience. Prometheus, who had gifted fire to mankind, continued to act as humanity's subtle guardian. Yet even his love for mortals brought him into conflict with Zeus. The great Titan's defiance symbolized the tension between divine authority and mortal ingenuity. Humanity, empowered yet fragile, learned that progress carried risk. Every tool, every invention, every spark of insight came with consequences, and the gods watched, sometimes with admiration, often with stern judgment. Conflict within Olympus itself never ceased. Zeus's decisions were occasionally questioned by other gods. Hera, ever vigilant, monitored Zeus's choices, ensuring that loyalty and order were maintained. Yet she herself harbored ambitions and desires that sometimes brought her into quiet contention with her husband. Aphrodite's influence over love and passion caused rivalries and alliances to shift unpredictably, while Ares' love of war encouraged both heroism and chaos among mortals. Even minor deities and spirits influenced events, creating a complex web of interaction that made Olympus dynamic, unpredictable, and endlessly fascinating. The Olympians' rule was not limited to the divine alone. It shaped entire civilizations. Mortals constructed temples to honor gods, enacted festivals to celebrate victories or seek favor, and inscribed myths that would endure through centuries. These rituals were more than superstition. They were a way to communicate with the divine, to understand one's place in the universe, and to participate, however subtly, in the grand narrative woven by the gods. Every act of piety, every challenge faced by a mortal, every hero's triumph or failure contributed to a living tapestry of cosmic storytelling. Amid this order, mortals continued to strive, explore, and challenge themselves. Heroes like Perseus, Bellerophon, and the nascent tales of Heracles embarked on quests that tested strength, wisdom, and moral fiber. They faced monstrous foes, serpents, giants, and cursed beasts, and overcame impossible obstacles, often with divine assistance. Their stories became templates for courage and ingenuity, illustrating the balance between human ambition and the overarching authority of the Olympians. Yet even in this era of apparent order, tension and prophecy persisted. Whispers of unrest from the imprisoned titans in Tartarus, rumors of mortal hubris, and the unpredictable whims of the gods ensured that the world remained dynamic. Fate was not static. It was a living, breathing force, intricately tied to the choices of both mortals and immortals. Every decision, whether a god's decree or a hero's daring action, reverberated across the cosmos, influencing destinies in ways subtle and profound. The Olympians, aware of the precarious balance, often acted with deliberate foresight. Hera's guidance, Apollo's foresight, and even Hermes' cunning interventions shaped events to preserve harmony while allowing space for growth, challenge, and evolution. These acts of divine management were never simple. They were layered, complex, and sometimes contradictory, reflecting the multifaceted nature of the gods themselves. Civilization flourished under their influence, yet it was never free from the possibility of chaos. Mortals learned that divine favor could elevate, but also that missteps brought swift consequences. Heroes emerged as intermediaries between gods and humans, embodying lessons of strength, wisdom, and morality. Each tale of valor, cunning, or misjudgment contributed to an ever-expanding mythology that shaped Western literature, art, and culture for centuries. Through the Olympians' rule, the universe achieved a new balance, a cosmos where power, justice, creativity, and morality were intertwined. Mortals were empowered, heroes tested, and the gods' personalities, ambitions, and desires ensured a dynamic, living world. It was an age of growth, of challenge, of epic storytelling, where every event, divine or mortal, was part of a grand narrative spanning heaven, earth, and the underworld. Thus, the Olympians' rule established both structure and drama. It was a period in which gods guided the cosmos, mortals discovered their potential, and heroes became legends. The balance of power, the play of fate, and the constant tension between ambition and consequence created stories that would captivate Europe, America, and the world, inspiring generations to explore, imagine, and dream. In the age of Olympians, the world had been shaped, civilization had begun, and the first true legends were born. It was a time when gods walked among mortals, when heroism and hubris intertwined, and when the foundation of mythology was firmly established, setting the stage for adventures, epics, and stories that would resonate for millennia. The divine interventions and the mortal quests. The age of Olympians had brought order, power, and structure to the cosmos, yet the world of mortals was alive with stories waiting to unfold. Humans, small and fragile, were no longer mere spectators of divine affairs. They had begun to act, to explore, to challenge the limits of their strength and intelligence. And wherever they went, the gods watched, guided, and sometimes intervened, shaping the destiny of mortals with invisible hands and subtle whispers. Zeus, king of the gods, observed with keen interest. From his throne of storms, he saw the rise of heroes and the ambitions of kings. Some mortals pleased him with bravery and cunning. Others provoked his wrath with pride and defiance. His thunderbolt, symbol of authority and judgment, hung over the world like a constant reminder. Divine power was absolute, yet justice was tempered with opportunity. Athena, goddess of wisdom, often descended in disguise to guide those she deemed worthy. She inspired strategy in battle, insight in governance, and cleverness in problem-solving. Mortals who received her guidance often became legends. Perseus, who beheaded Medusa, Odysseus, who navigated perilous seas, and countless others who walked paths fraught with danger and reward. Her presence ensured that intelligence and strategy could triumph where sheer strength might fail. Meanwhile, Ares, god of war, stirred conflict and courage alike. Battles were not only physical, they were tests of moral fiber. Heroes were challenged to overcome fear, pride, and internal doubts as much as any monstrous foe. Every clash of swords, every siege, every quest carried the imprint of divine influence. Mortals learned that courage without wisdom could be destructive, yet courage guided by divine favor could achieve the impossible. Prometheus, the Titan who had gifted fire, continued to champion humanity subtly. He encouraged innovation, invention, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Mortals learned to craft tools, cultivate the earth, and explore the mysteries of the world. Yet each gift from Prometheus also carried risk, for Zeus's watchful eye never strayed far. Mortals who acted with hubris or ignored divine guidance faced consequences that became cautionary tales, immortalized in stories that would echo across Europe, America, and beyond. The gods themselves were dynamic, flawed, and fascinating. Their personalities intertwined with mortal affairs, creating narratives rich in complexity and intrigue. Hera's vigilance ensured justice and retribution, while Apollo's foresight offered guidance and warning. Hermes, the trickster and messenger, bridged divine and mortal worlds, influencing journeys, trades, and quests. Each god's unique personality made the world unpredictable, thrilling, and alive with possibility. By the end of this era, mortal quests had become legendary, setting the standard for heroism, morality, and ingenuity. Each adventure, whether successful or tragic, reinforced the lessons of courage, humility, and divine human interaction. The stories created in this time formed the backbone of Greek mythology, tales that inspired art, literature, philosophy, and imagination across centuries, captivating audiences in Europe, America, and the wider world. The interplay between gods and mortals was a delicate dance of influence, ambition, and fate. Heroes, guided by wisdom or tempted by pride, navigated a world alive with divine power. Mortals learned that every act mattered, that courage and intelligence could overcome seemingly impossible odds, and that the favor of the gods was both gift and responsibility. Thus, the Olympians' divine interventions and the mortal quests they inspired created a universe alive with drama, adventure, and moral lessons. Every hero, every challenge, and every divine act became a story worth telling, a myth that would echo across generations. The Age of Olympians was not merely the rule of gods, it was a dynamic, interactive stage where mortals learned, grew, and became legends. And so, as the stories of monsters, heroes, and divine encounters unfolded across the mortal world, the cosmos itself seemed to watch, waiting for new legends, new trials, and new triumphs that would continue to shape the endless tapestry of Greek mythology.
The rise of the great heroes. The age of heroes dawned like a golden sunrise after the stormy reign of Titans and the dawn of Olympians. The gods now ruled from their shining thrones on Mount Olympus, yet their gaze often turned toward the mortal world below. a realm brimming with courage, fear, and boundless potential. From the union of gods and mortals came beings unlike any other, the demigods. They possessed the blood of immortality and the heart of humankind, a rare combination of divine power and mortal vulnerability. Their birth marked a turning point in the tapestry of Greek mythology, for through them the bridge between heaven and earth was built. Perseus was among the first. Born of Zeus and Danae, his story began in secrecy, hidden from a fearful king who sought to destroy him. Yet destiny, guided by the unseen hands of the Moirae, the Fates, had already written his path. Armed with gifts from Athena and Hermes, Perseus faced the monstrous Gorgon, Medusa, whose gaze could turn any living soul to stone. In a moment of divine brilliance, he used a polished shield to avoid her deadly eyes and struck her down, proving that courage and cunning could defy terror itself. His victory did not merely save lives, it inspired mortals to believe that even in a world ruled by gods, human will could carve its own legend. Then came Theseus, the son of Poseidon, a man whose name would echo through centuries. His journey began in Athens, a city yet to know its glory. When he heard of the monstrous Minotaur, a beast half man and half bull dwelling within the labyrinth of Crete, Theseus volunteered himself as a sacrifice, not to die, but to conquer. Guided by Ariadne's golden thread, he found his way through the twisting passages and slew the creature, ending generations of terror. In his triumph, he became the symbol of wisdom and bravery, the perfect blend of mortal mind and divine strength. But no name burned brighter than Heracles, known later to the Romans as Hercules. Born of Zeus and the mortal Alcmaeon, his birth was both a gift and a curse. Hera, consumed by jealousy, sent serpents to kill the infant, but Heracles crushed them with his bare hands. His life was a series of impossible trials, the 12 labors, designed to break both body and soul. From slaying the Nemean lion to capturing Cerberus from the underworld, Heracles' strength transcended mortality. Yet behind his power lay deep sorrow and guilt, reminders of his humanity. The gods adored him, the mortals worshipped him, but his true greatness lay not in his might, but in his endurance. Jason, leader of the Argonauts, embodied the spirit of exploration and ambition. His quest for the Golden Fleece took him across treacherous seas, through islands of enchantment and danger. With divine aid from Hera and the tragic love of Medea, he achieved the unthinkable. Yet, like all heroes, his triumph carried a shadow. Love, betrayal, and destiny intertwined to remind him that glory often demands sacrifice. Behind all these tales, the invisible threads of fate, the Moirae, wove silently. Even Zeus, mighty king of the gods, could not alter their weaving. Every hero, no matter how divine, was bound by their destiny. Some were blessed with victory, others doomed to tragedy, yet all left behind stories that would outlast their lives. The gods themselves often watched with conflicting emotions: pride in their children's bravery, fear of their growing fame, compassion for their struggles, and sometimes envy. For in their mortal fragility lay something the gods could never possess: the courage to face death and still fight on. These heroes represented the ideals of their age: bravery, intelligence, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. They shaped kingdoms, fought monsters, defied prophecies, and challenged the very boundaries between godhood and mortality. Through them, the mortal world was no longer small or helpless. It became a stage of divine drama, a theater where courage and fate met face to face. The people of Greece began to worship these figures not as gods, but as immortalized mortals. Shrines rose where they had walked, songs were sung in their honor, and their adventures became lessons for generations. From the mountains of Arcadia to the islands of Crete, every whisper of wind seemed to carry their names. But even as glory filled the air, the shadow of tragedy loomed. For the gods, though generous, were not forgiving. The balance of Olympus demanded that no mortal rise too high without paying the price. The higher the hero climbed, the heavier the fall that awaited. The age of heroes was brilliant, but fleeting, a spark in eternity's darkness. It showed mortals what they could be when touched by divinity, and it reminded the gods of what they had lost: the thrill of mortality, the taste of struggle, the beauty of impermanence. And so the great heroes walked their paths, not knowing that their stories were just the beginning of a grander, darker saga that would test not only the strength of man, but the will of the gods.
The wrath of the gods. There are moments in history when the heavens grow silent, not from peace, but from the weight of judgment. The age of heroes had filled the earth with glory, courage, and triumph, but with it came pride, the kind that blinds mortals and provokes the gods. The Olympians, though radiant and divine, were not immune to emotion. They loved, envied, and raged as fiercely as any mortal. And when mortals forgot their place, the gods reminded them, not with whispers, but with storms, plagues, and punishments that echoed through the ages. At first, it began subtly. Temples that once glowed with offerings began to dim. Sacrifices were forgotten. Prayers grew shallow, and kings began to believe their victories were earned by their own hands, not by the blessings of Olympus. Zeus watched from his throne, his gaze cold and heavy. Lightning coiled in his grasp like serpents waiting to strike. It was hubris, mortal arrogance, that first drew divine fury. When mortals claimed equality with gods, the harmony of heaven and earth shattered. One such tale was that of Niobe, the proud queen who mocked Leto, mother of Apollo and Artemis, boasting that she was greater because she had more children. Leto's children descended in wrath, their arrows silent but merciless. In a single bay, Niobe's sons and daughters were struck down, her laughter turned to endless grief. Her body, petrified by sorrow, became stone, forever weeping. Then came Arachne, a mortal weaver whose skill rivaled Athena's own. When challenged, she dared to boast that her art surpassed that of the goddess. Her tapestry was flawless, so perfect that even Athena was filled with awe and fury. With a single touch, Athena transformed her into a spider, cursed to weave for eternity. From her, mortals learned that talent without humility becomes poison. The wrath of Poseidon, too, was legendary. The seas that once carried heroes to glory now turned against them. When a mortal king defied the sea god by failing to honor his promise, Poseidon unleashed waves that swallowed cities whole. Storms raged across coastlines, and ships vanished into the abyss, leaving only whispers and salt behind. Even the gentle gods had their limits. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, withdrew her blessings when mortals disrespected the sanctity of life and the balance of nature. Fields turned barren, rivers dried, and famine crept across lands like a shadow. The cries of children reached Olympus, but until mortals learned repentance, the earth remained still and silent. And then there was Zeus's greatest punishment, one that would scar humanity forever. When mortals grew too proud, too violent, and too corrupt, he decided the world must be cleansed. He unleashed the great flood, a deluge that consumed kingdoms and drowned arrogance beneath its waves. Only Deucalion and Pyrrha, righteous and pure of heart, survived, sailing on a small ark across endless waters. When the storm subsided, they repopulated the world, hurling stones over their shoulders that transformed into humans, a symbol of rebirth from destruction. The gods' wrath was not cruelty, it was correction. In every punishment there was a lesson: humility, respect, and remembrance. Mortals were reminded that power without reverence leads to ruin, and even the mightiest heroes could fall beneath divine judgment. But there were moments of mercy, too. Athena taught mortals wisdom after folly. Apollo brought music and healing to soothe pain after tragedy. Hermes guided lost souls and whispered to humankind that even in wrath there is the seed of forgiveness. The gods were not destroyers by nature, they were keepers of balance. Yet deep within Olympus, a change began to stir. Some gods questioned the endless cycle of punishment and pride. Prometheus's defiance still echoed in their minds, his belief that humanity could rise, learn, and evolve. Others, like Hera and Poseidon, argued that mortals would always repeat their sins. Thus began a divine division, a rift between those who believed in mortal potential and those who demanded eternal submission. Below, humanity rebuilt itself. Temples rose again, offerings filled the altars, and hymns echoed through the valleys. But the memory of divine fury lingered. Each thunderclap reminded them of Zeus's anger. Each storm at sea whispered Poseidon's name. Every loom recalled Arachne's curse. Fear became reverence, reverence became faith, and faith became the foundation upon which new civilizations would grow. In time, poets and storytellers would sing of these days, not merely as warnings, but as the essence of human existence, fragile, flawed, and yet capable of greatness. The wrath of the gods was not the end of humankind, but the beginning of their understanding. From that point onward, every mortal knew the gods could grant life or take it, bless or curse, love or destroy. And yet, despite that knowledge, humanity continued to dream, to build, to challenge, because even in the shadow of Olympus, the human spirit refused to bow completely. And somewhere among the clouds above, the gods watched, not in hatred, but in fascination. For they saw in humanity the reflection of their own fire, reckless, proud, beautiful, and endlessly striving.
The age of prophecy and the fall of kings. The storms of divine wrath had passed, but their echoes remained, etched in stone, whispered in prayers, and carved into the memory of humankind. The mortals who survived the gods' fury had rebuilt their cities, yet something had changed. They had become cautious, reverent, and deeply aware that fate was not theirs to command. The age that followed would not be ruled by war or power, but by prophecy, the mysterious voice of destiny that could not be silenced even by the gods themselves. It began with whispers carried by the wind, spoken by the oracles, mortals chosen to speak on behalf of the divine. Their eyes glowed with visions of futures yet unseen. Their tongues uttered truths wrapped in riddles. And the most sacred of all stood upon the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the oracle of Delphi, where Apollo himself was believed to breathe through the priestess known as Pythia. Kings and heroes alike climbed the steep path to Delphi, desperate for answers. They came seeking victory, power, love, or redemption, but they left burdened by riddles that shaped their destinies. For prophecy was never a gift. It was a mirror that revealed the inescapable truth. One of the first to challenge this truth was King Laius of Thebes. When the oracle warned him that his own son would one day kill him, Laius tried to defy fate. He ordered the child to be cast away upon the mountains. But destiny, woven by the hands of the Moirai, cannot be severed. The child, Oedipus, survived,
raised by strangers, unaware of his origin. In time, he returned, unknowingly fulfilled the prophecy by slaying his father and marrying his mother. When the truth was revealed, Oedipus blinded himself in despair, proving that no man, no matter how noble, could escape the threads of fate. Meanwhile, across the Aegean, a new prophecy stirred in the city of Argos. The oracle foretold that a grandson of King Acrisius would one day bring about his death. Fearing the words, Acrisius imprisoned his daughter Danae in a bronze chamber. But Zeus, ever the unseen watcher, descended as golden light and fathered a child, Perseus. Years later, the prophecy fulfilled itself, not through malice, but through accident, as Perseus's stray throw of a discus struck Acrisius dead. Thus, prophecy was not merely punishment, it was inevitability. Prophecies did not belong only to kings and heroes. They touched even the gods. When Thetis, the sea nymph, was foretold to bear a son mightier than his father, Zeus himself stepped back, arranging her marriage to a mortal to preserve the balance of Olympus. From that union was born Achilles, destined to be the greatest warrior of his age, and to die young, his name immortalized forever. The era of prophecy became a delicate dance between fear and faith. Mortals sought to control destiny, while the gods, bound by their own decrees, watched as the web of fate tightened around all creation. For every prophecy fulfilled, another was born, rippling through time like the aftershock of thunder. In the city of Troy, the princess Cassandra was gifted with divine sight by Apollo. But when she rejected his love, the god cursed her. Our prophecies would always be true, but never believed. She foresaw the burning of Troy, the fall of her family, and the endless wars that would follow, but her voice was drowned in disbelief. The tragedy of Cassandra became the symbol of humanity's greatest flaw, the refusal to heed truth until it is too late. Prophecy had become both light and shadow. It guided the noble, punished the arrogant, and reminded gods and mortals alike that knowledge of the future was as dangerous as ignorance. Even Zeus, ruler of all, could only look upon the threads of destiny, not alter them. For beyond the Olympians, beyond chaos itself, the fates sat in eternal silence, three sisters, spinning, measuring, and cutting the threads of all existence. As generations passed, the words of oracles shaped kingdoms and legends alike. Some rulers rose because they obeyed prophecy. Others fell because they tried to resist it. The people learned that fate could not be bargained with, only understood and accepted. But not all accepted it willingly. Some mortals began to resent the gods for binding them to such unchangeable paths. They built secret cults, whispering prayers not to Olympus, but to the forgotten forces older than the gods, chaos, Nyx, and the shadows of the underworld. These were mortals who sought freedom from fate, not realizing that their rebellion was itself part of fate's grand design. As the sun set on this age, the world felt heavier, wiser, and more tragic. The glory of heroes was giving way to the inevitability of destiny. The songs of poets no longer celebrated mere triumphs, but the sorrow of knowing that all victories end in loss. Yet within this sorrow lay beauty, the beauty of understanding one's place in the eternal order. The age of prophecy taught both gods and mortals that power, no matter how great, bows before destiny. Kings fell, heroes wept, and even Olympus trembled before the unchangeable will of time. But from the ruins of pride and the ashes of kingdoms, a new wisdom arose, that to live, knowing one's fate and still daring to love, to fight, to dream. That is what made humanity eternal.
The Trojan War. Pride, passion, and prophecy fulfilled. There are stories that time itself cannot erase, stories whispered by the waves of the Aegean Sea and carried on the winds of history. Among them stands one tale greater than all, the Trojan War, a war born not from need or politics, but from pride, passion, and prophecy. It was the war that united gods and mortals in one grand tragedy, the clash that would define the very soul of Greek mythology. It began not on the battlefield, but in the heavens. A single event, a wedding, set the world on a path to ruin. When Peleus, a mortal king, and Thetis, the sea nymph destined to bear a mighty son, were wed, all the gods were invited to the feast, all but one, Eris, goddess of discord. Insulted and enraged, she arrived uninvited, tossing a golden apple onto the banquet table. Etched upon its surface were the fateful words, "To the fairest." In an instant, harmony shattered. 3 goddesses laid claim to the apple: Hera, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom and victory in battle. But Aphrodite whispered of love, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Blinded by desire, Paris chose Aphrodite, handing her the apple and sealing the doom of his city. Helen, though mortal, was radiant beyond compare, daughter of Zeus himself, wife of King Menelaus of Sparta. When Paris, guided by Aphrodite, journeyed to Sparta and took Helen away to Troy, it was more than an act of love, it was an act of defiance. The abduction of Helen became the spark that ignited the greatest war the world had ever known. Menelaus's rage spread like wildfire. His brother Agamemnon, the mighty king of Mycenae, called upon all the rulers of Greece to honor their oaths to defend Helen's marriage. Warriors from every corner of Greece answered the call. Achilles, the son of Thetis, unmatched in battle; Odysseus, the cunning mind of Ithaca; Ajax, the unshakable tower of strength; and countless others whose names would echo in eternity. As their ships filled the horizon, the sea god Poseidon stirred the waves beneath them, while the winds of Aeolus guided their sails. The gods watched from Olympus, divided, some siding with Troy, others with Greece. For this was no mere war of mortals, it was a divine test of loyalty, pride, and vengeance. When the Greeks arrived at Troy, the earth trembled beneath their armies. For 9 long years the war raged. Blood and glory stained the plains of Ilium. The Trojans, led by noble Priam and his valiant son Hector, fought with courage unmatched, but fate had already written their story. Among the Greeks, Achilles shone brightest, swift, fierce, and unrelenting, yet even he was bound by prophecy. His mother Thetis had warned him if he stayed home, he would live a long, forgotten life, but if he fought at Troy, he would die young and immortalized. Achilles chose glory, and in doing so, sealed his fate. As battles thundered and heroes fell, the gods themselves intervened. Athena guided spears, Apollo turned arrows, and Aphrodite shielded her beloved Paris. Even Zeus, though bound by the laws of fate, could not resist watching with sorrow and awe as mortals played out the tragedy of destiny. The turning point came when Hector, the pride of Troy, killed Patroclus, Achilles' dearest companion. Consumed by grief and rage, Achilles returned to battle like a living storm. His fury was divine,
unstoppable, merciless. He struck down Hector before the walls of Troy, dragging his body through the dust as the city wept. It was vengeance, but it was also prophecy fulfilled, for with Hector's death, the end had begun. Yet victory did not bring peace. Achilles, too, met his foretold death, struck by an arrow to his heel, the only part of him left vulnerable. Paris had fired the arrow, but Apollo had guided it. Thus, even the mightiest warrior could not escape the design of fate. Troy's final fall came through cunning, not combat. After years of siege, the Greeks devised a deception, a massive wooden horse left as an offering to the Trojans. Believing it a symbol of surrender, they brought it within their gates, but hidden inside were Greek soldiers waiting for night. When darkness fell, the gates of Troy opened to the enemy, and the city burned. Its cries of its people rose to the heavens as fire consumed its golden towers. Helen was returned to Sparta, but no joy remained. Troy lay in ashes, its heroes gone, its glory turned to dust. The Greeks, too, paid their price. Many never returned home, lost to the wrath of gods and the endless sea. The Trojan War ended, but its echo would live forever, in songs, in legends, in the hearts of men and gods alike. It was more than a war. It was the ultimate lesson of pride, passion, and prophecy. The gods had played their game, and mortals had danced on the strings of fate, proving once again that no victory comes without sacrifice. As the flames of Troy died down, the world grew silent, not in peace, but in mourning. For though kingdoms could be rebuilt and heroes reborn in story, the truth remained eternal. In the game of gods and men, even love can start a war, and even victory can taste like loss.
The return of the heroes, curses, wandering, and the price of glory. The flames of Troy had long died out, but their smoke still hung over the world, a haunting memory of pride and vengeance. The war was over, yet peace was nowhere to be found. The gods, though silent, still watched from their thrones, and their judgment was not yet complete. For those who survived the fall of Troy, the journey home would prove to be their greatest trial of all. The shores of Ilium were littered with ashes and broken spears. The once mighty Greek kings now stood as weary men, their armor stained with the ghosts of victory. They believed they had conquered destiny, but in truth, destiny had merely changed its form. Each hero, each ship carried a different curse, a divine punishment for the arrogance that had led them to war. Among the returning kings was Agamemnon, leader of the Greeks, whose pride had driven the armies to Troy. He returned to Mycenae triumphant, bearing the spoils of conquest, but fate awaited him at his own doorstep. His wife Clytemnestra had not forgotten the daughter he had sacrificed years before, Iphigenia, offered to appease Artemis for favorable winds. When Agamemnon entered his palace, she greeted him with honeyed words and deadly intent. That night, as he bathed, she struck him down with an axe, ending the mightiest of kings in silence. His victory at Troy had only paved the road to his own destruction. Far across the sea, Menelaus, husband of Helen, faced storms and shipwrecks stirred by the wrath of the gods. Though he reclaimed his wife, peace between them was fragile, for how could love survive after such ruin? They wandered the seas for years before finding safe harbor in Egypt, their hearts heavy with the memories of what love and war had cost them. But no tale of return burned brighter than that of Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca. For him, the journey home was not a voyage,
but an odyssey, a decade-long trial of wit, endurance, and will. The gods themselves seemed determined to test the man who once outsmarted even Troy. When the Greek fleet first set sail from the smoldering ruins, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, turned her gaze away, angered by the Greeks' desecration of temples and cruelty and victory. In her absence, Poseidon, lord of the sea, rose in fury against Odysseus, whose clever mind had devised the wooden horse that doomed Troy. The waves themselves became his enemy. Blown off course, Odysseus and his men landed upon strange, enchanted shores, realms where the line between mortal and divine blurred like mist. They met the lotus eaters, whose sweet fruits made men forget their homes. They faced the Cyclops Polyphemus, a monstrous son of Poseidon, whom Odysseus blinded to escape. His cry of vengeance reached the depths of the sea, and from that moment Poseidon vowed that Odysseus would wander the waters endlessly before ever seeing Ithaca again. There were lands of beauty and horror alike. The sorceress Circe turned his men into swine, yet later aided him with wisdom. The dead themselves rose to speak with him in the underworld, where the ghost of Achilles lamented his fate, preferring a short, forgotten life to eternal glory among the dead. It was a reminder that victory is not measured in songs, but in the peace of the living. Odysseus faced the sirens, whose voices could lure sailors to their doom, and sailed between Scylla and Charybdis, monsters of sea and storm. Each trial stripped away another piece of his pride, until only his longing for home remained. For 10 years he battled not armies, but fate itself, proving that the greatest hero is not the one who conquers others, but the one who endures. At last, when all his men were gone, when even his strength began to fade, Odysseus washed ashore on the island of Calypso, a goddess who loved him and offered him immortality. Yet he refused, yearning instead for the mortal embrace of his wife Penelope, who still waited for him in Ithaca, faithful through decades of absence and doubt. Moved by his endurance, the gods relented. Hermes commanded Calypso to let him go, and Athena, her anger cooled, guided him once more. When Odysseus finally set foot on his homeland, he found his palace overrun by suitors, arrogant men who sought to claim his wife and throne. Disguised as a beggar, he tested them, and with divine precision he revealed himself. His arrows flew like judgment, and in that moment the king reclaimed not just his kingdom, but his name. But even then peace was fragile. The gods demanded balance. Every act of vengeance weighed against the laws of fate. Odysseus had returned home, but he was not the same man who left. He had seen the limits of glory and the price of pride. His story became a mirror for all who sought greatness, a reminder that the gods give gifts, but they never give them freely. Across Greece, other heroes met their own ends. Ajax, once unbreakable, fell to madness and despair. Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles, was struck down upon the altar of Apollo. None escaped the shadow of Troy, not even those who had won. In the end, the Trojan War had not been a victory at all, but a curse, a wound that time could not heal. The Greeks returned not as conquerors, but as ghosts carrying the weight of their choices. The gods had proven their power once more. They could raise men to glory, but they could also remind them, painfully, that mortals are never the masters of fate. And as the waves lapped at the shores of a broken world, one truth echoed across the ages. The war was not over when the last arrow flew. It lived on in the hearts of those who survived.
The rise of new gods.
The age of heroes ends. The smoke of Troy had drifted away, carried by winds that whispered of endings. Across the lands of Greece, the heroes of old had faded into silence, their swords rusting, their thrones empty. The great age of war and glory was over, but something new was stirring in the hearts of gods and men alike. The age of heroes had ended, and the age of gods was changing. Even upon Mount Olympus, the air had grown heavy with reflection. The gods who once delighted in the chaos of mortals now watched with unease. The old order that began with Zeus himself trembled beneath the weight of prophecy. For every age must die, so that another may rise, and even immortals are not beyond the turning of fate. In the beginning, the gods had shaped the world, each embodying a truth, a force, a purpose. But as mankind grew wiser, their prayers became fewer, their offerings less frequent. The mortals no longer looked to the heavens for every answer. They had learned from war, from suffering, from loss. They had learned to depend on themselves. And in that quiet defiance, the gods sensed a new kind of power being born, one they could neither command nor fully understand. Zeus, lord of the sky, stood upon his golden throne, his thunderbolts dimmer than before. Around him gathered the great council, Hera, ever proud and watchful, Poseidon, brooding with the restlessness of the sea, Athena, whose wisdom now seemed more suited to mortals than to gods. Even Apollo's light, though radiant, flickered with unease. "What becomes of us," asked Hera, her voice cutting through the hall, "if men no longer bow?" Athena's calm eyes turned toward the mortal world below. "Then perhaps we have taught them too well," she replied. "They have learned to seek their own destiny, and in doing so, they have become something we once were." The council fell silent. For the first time in eternity, the gods feared irrelevance. Meanwhile, upon the earth, the sons and daughters of heroes had begun to forge their own paths. They no longer sought the favor of Olympus, but the strength within themselves. Cities rose, laws were written, and philosophy was born. Men began to ask not what the gods demanded, but why the world was as it was. This birth of thought, this quiet awakening, was the dawn of a new kind of power, knowledge. In the shadows of the ancient temples, old priests whispered that the age of divine intervention was ending. The oracles spoke in softer tones now, their visions clouded and uncertain. Even Delphi, where Apollo's voice had once thundered, now echoed only faintly. The gods had not vanished, but they were retreating, step by step, into myth. Yet not all gods accepted this fading quietly. Ares, god of war, still sought blood and conquest, stirring men to fight. Dionysus, wild and free, inspired mortals to revel in ecstasy and madness. Hermes, ever the messenger, whispered secrets into human dreams, guiding invention, trade, and travel. Each god found new ways to exist within the world that no longer fully belonged to them. Zeus, seeing the inevitable, began to look beyond the age of gods toward something greater, a legacy. He gathered his children and spoke not of war, but of balance. He said, "We have ruled long enough. Now we must become the echo that guides them, not the voice that commands." Athena was the first to understand. She appeared to the greatest thinkers of Greece, to poets, to philosophers, to dreamers, not as a deity demanding worship, but as inspiration itself. Her wisdom flowed into human thought, shaping the minds that would one day define civilization. Apollo turned his music into light, guiding the birth of art and reason. Poseidon withdrew his wrath, letting the sailors of the Aegean roam free beneath his calm waves. Even Hades, lord of the underworld, softened his rule, allowing souls to find peace instead of endless shadow. But not all gods accepted their fading glory quietly. Some, like Ares and Hera, clung desperately to power. Their jealousy and pride led to new conflicts unseen by mortal eyes, quiet wars among immortals, battles of faith and influence. The old myths call these the twilight struggles, when Olympus trembled not from human prayers, but from the gods' fear of being forgotten. It was during this twilight that a final prophecy was spoken, whispered by the Moirai, the fates themselves. It said that one day the memory of gods would live only through the stories told by mortals. The world would not end in fire or storm, but in silence, when the last believer closed their eyes and no longer looked upward. And yet there was beauty in that ending, for as the divine faded, the mortal spirit rose. Humanity, once trembling beneath the will of Zeus, now stood upright, daring to look the gods in the eye. In their temples, the fires burned lower, but in the hearts of men a new flame was lit, the fire of creation, of art, of understanding. Zeus watched this quietly from Olympus, and though thunder still rolled in his hands, there was something softer in his gaze. Perhaps pride, perhaps sorrow, or perhaps the recognition that his rule had achieved its purpose. The gods would live on, but differently, not as rulers, but as legends, in marble statues, in whispered prayers, in stories told beneath starlit skies. They would become eternal not through fear, but through memory. And that, perhaps, was the truest kind of immortality. Thus ended the age of heroes, and with it the reign of gods who walked among men. The world turned, the stars shifted, and history moved forward into the dawn of a new age, one shaped not by thunder or prophecy, but by human hands. And somewhere, far above, on the silent peaks of Olympus, the old gods watched, not with anger, but with wonder. For in mankind they saw the reflection of what they had once been, proud, flawed, and beautifully alive.
The Forgotten Realms, where the old gods sleep. The world had changed. The voices that once thundered from Mount Olympus had grown faint, not gone, but quiet, like a distant echo carried on the wind. The temples still stood, their marble faces worn by rain and time, but the hymns that once filled them were replaced by silence. And yet silence has its own power, a waiting stillness where ancient things slumber, not dead, but dreaming. The old gods had not perished. Immortality does not die, it merely withdraws. Beneath the mountains, within the seas, and deep in the forgotten corners of the world, they slept, hidden from mortal sight, but alive within the pulse of the earth. There are places men seldom go, caverns where the air hums with ancient power, islands where the waves whisper names older than memory, forests where moonlight falls like silver fire. These are the forgotten realms, the resting places of the divine. When the last prayers faded, Zeus withdrew his lightning into the heart of the sky. His throne, once burning with eternal light, stood empty, the clouds around it heavy with quiet thunder.
They say his spirit became the storm itself, that every roll of thunder is not wrath, but remembrance. Poseidon returned to the depths, his trident sinking into the ocean's floor. The sea became his temple, vast, wild, and unknowable. Sailors still whisper his name before a voyage, though they no longer believe. And sometimes, when the waves rise high and crash against the shore with impossible force, it feels as though the god beneath still breathes. Hades did not change. His realm of shadow has always existed apart from mortal worship. But even he, the eternal keeper of souls, grew quiet. The underworld became less a prison and more a sanctuary, a place of eternal rest, where the echoes of humanity find peace in his care. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, faded into thought itself. Her temples may have fallen, but her spirit lived on in philosophy, in knowledge, in every human pursuit of truth. Her voice became the whisper of ideas in the minds of dreamers and scholars, guiding humanity toward enlightenment. Though unseen, she was everywhere, in the spark of discovery, in the calm of reason, in the courage to question. Apollo's light dimmed in the heavens, but burned brighter in art. His music became the soul of poetry, the harmony of the stars. His chariot no longer crossed the sky, yet his radiance lingered in every sunrise, reminding the world that beauty is a kind of divinity that never fades. Ares, the god of war, slept the deepest, but his dreams were violent, filled with the cries of soldiers and the clash of iron. And so long as men wage war, Ares will never truly rest. His power lingers in the rage that drives conflict, in the fire that refuses to die. Peace may silence him for a time, but history always calls him back. Hera, the queen of Olympus, withdrew into the fabric of family, of love, of loyalty and betrayal. Though no one kneels before her now, her essence lives in every bond between husband and wife, in every vow broken or kept. She became the heartbeat of relationships, sometimes tender, sometimes cruel, forever reminding mortals that love, like divinity, demands both devotion and pain. And Aphrodite, she did not fade. How could she? So long as love exists, so long as beauty stirs the heart, Aphrodite breathes. She no longer walks the waves in mortal form, but she lives within every glance, every kiss, every spark that ignites between souls. Of all the gods, she remains the most alive, not worshipped, but felt. Even Hermes found his place in the new age. He became the spirit of travel, of exchange, of connection, the unseen hand that moves between worlds. When a thought crosses the globe in a heartbeat, when words bridge oceans, Hermes smiles. His sandals of speed now carry not messages from Olympus, but ideas from one mind to another. And Dionysus, the wild one, the liberator, still dances wherever joy breaks the chains of sorrow. In laughter, in music, in the chaos of celebration, his presence flickers like firelight. He is the reminder that even in a world of reason, madness has its place. But not all the gods found peace. Some wandered the edges of time, trapped between memory and oblivion. They haunt the ruins of their temples, their voices thin as wind. Travelers in distant lands still claim to have glimpsed them, a shadow that moves where no man walks, a whisper in forgotten tongues. The ancients would say, "The gods are not gone, they are simply waiting to be remembered." Sometimes, in moments of Greek peril or wonder, the veil between worlds grows thin. A thunderstorm breaks with sudden fury. The ocean roars louder than it should. A poet feels a line of verse not his own pour through his lips. And in those moments the old gods stir, for faith, once born, never fully dies. Even now, as centuries pass and mankind builds towers of glass instead of marble, something ancient endures. The gods may no longer demand temples, but their stories remain, and stories are the true immortality. Every retelling breathes life back into them. Every listener becomes a believer, if only for a moment. And perhaps that is their design. Perhaps the gods knew that to live forever, they needed to be forgotten first, so that they could be reborn in the imagination of mankind. As the night sky glimmers above Greece, the stars form patterns older than language. The constellations tell their tales of Zeus the eagle, Athena the owl, Poseidon's trident shining in Orion's belt. The heavens themselves have become their final temple, eternal and untouchable. The gods sleep, yes, but they dream, and through those dreams we remember. For the divine was never truly above us. It was always within us, waiting to awaken. And when someone, somewhere, whispers their names once more, in awe, in wonder, in faith, the mountains will tremble again, and Olympus will remember its kings.
The echoes of Olympus when myth becomes memory. Time is the truest god, silent, patient, and merciless. It erases empires, crumbles mountains, and turns even the mightiest of names into whispers. Yet there are some stories that time cannot bury. They linger, in stone, in song, in the pulse of human imagination. Such are the echoes of Olympus, where the gods no longer reign, but still live in memory. Long after the last temple fell and the final prayer was spoken, the stories endured. The marble statues that once shone with offerings grew pale and cracked, their faces worn by centuries of rain. But though the eyes of stone turned blank, the souls they represented remained bright in the hearts of those who remembered. The people of Greece moved on, building new cities, worshipping new gods, writing new philosophies. Yet even as they embraced reason and science, they could not abandon the myths of their ancestors. For myths are not merely tales of gods and monsters, they are the mirrors through which humanity sees itself. It began slowly, the transformation from faith to legend. Once, Zeus had been the sky itself, his thunderbolts the voice of divine will. Now he became symbol of justice, of authority, of the eternal balance between power and mercy. Athena, once a goddess in marble temples, became the embodiment of wisdom and intellect, her owl now a sign of learning, not worship. The poets became the new priests. Homer, in his verses, did not pray to the gods, he remembered them. Hesiod, Aeschylus, Sophocles, they turned divine stories into art, tragedy, and reflection. Each line of verse was a kind of resurrection, bringing Olympus to life once more in the theater of the human mind. The myths crossed seas, languages, and centuries. Rome took them, reshaping the gods into new forms: Jupiter, Neptune, Minerva, different names, same souls. The divine fire was kept alive through adaptation, not worship. And as Rome gave way to Christianity and the temples turned into churches, the stories did not vanish. They simply sank deeper into art, into thought, into the fabric of Western imagination. Even the early philosophers who denied the literal gods could not escape their influence.
Plato saw divine truth in mythic form. Aristotle saw wisdom in allegory. They understood what few before them had, that mythology was not about belief, but about meaning. The gods were never just beings to be obeyed. They were reflections of human nature, our hopes, our fears, our flaws, our dreams. And so the echoes of Olympus became eternal, not as thunder in the sky, but as whispers in the human soul. When the Renaissance dawned many centuries later, those whispers rose again like music after silence. Painters and sculptors breathed new life into old legends. Michelangelo's Zeus, Raphael's Athena, Botticelli's Aphrodite rising from the sea, reborn as Venus. The gods became symbols of beauty, reason, and passion, no longer feared, but celebrated. The scholars of Europe studied the myths not as religion, but as revelation, clues to the origins of thought, of art, of civilization itself. In their eyes, Greece became not a lost faith, but a foundation. The myths of Olympus were no longer divine law, they were the blueprint of the human spirit. And even now in the modern world, in skyscrapers that reach the clouds, in rockets that break the sky, in the stories we tell through screens and sound, the old gods are still with us. Zeus thunders in our storms. Athena guides our curiosity. Hermes runs through the cables of the internet, carrying messages at the speed of light. And Aphrodite, she is there in every heartbeat that trembles at love's first spark. Because mythology is not about gods we once believed in, it's about the truths we still live by. Each generation retells the tales, shaping them to its image. Filmmakers give the gods faces. Writers turn them into heroes and villains. Children learn their names before they know their histories. They may not kneel before Olympus anymore, but they carry it in their imagination, and that is how gods live forever. The ruins of Delphi, once the navel of the world, now stand silent beneath the sun. Tourists walk where prophets once stood, their footsteps echoing through the marble halls of forgotten prayers. Yet in the quiet, if one listens closely, the air still hums, the stones remember, the earth remembers. Some say the gods are sleeping beneath those ruins, waiting for the world to believe again. Others say they never left, they simply changed their shape. Perhaps Zeus became the storm, Athena became wisdom itself, Poseidon became the endless sea. Perhaps they have always been here, hidden not above us, but within us, the divine spark that refuses to fade. And so the cycle continues. Time moves forward, civilizations rise and fall, and humanity keeps telling the same stories of creation, of love, of pride, of loss, of hope. Stories that began on Olympus and will end only when memory itself dies. For in the end, the gods were never separate from mankind. They were born from our dreams, our fears, our longing to understand the universe. We created them, and in doing so, we created ourselves. The echo of Olympus still hums in every story told beneath the stars, in every thunderstorm that shakes the night, in every artist's hand, in every philosopher's question. It lives. The divine, once external, has come home to the human heart. And perhaps that was Olympus's final gift, not immortality of body, but immortality of meaning. For even if the temples fall, even if the names are forgotten, the spirit endures. Because as long as we remember, Olympus will never truly be silent. The immortal legacy.
when gods become symbols. When the old temples turned to dust and the marble gods stood silent beneath the sun, one truth remained. The gods had not vanished. They had simply transformed. Their thrones no longer stood on Olympus, but within the human soul. Through centuries of art, philosophy, and imagination, they became symbols, immortal not in flesh, but in meaning. Zeus's thunder turned into the voice of authority and justice. Athena's wisdom flowed into the ink of scholars and poets. Poseidon's sea became a metaphor for the unconscious, vast and unknowable. And Aphrodite, she lingered in every heartbeat that trembled with love. As civilizations evolved, mankind stopped asking the gods for miracles and began becoming them. The human mind reached upward, curious and relentless, daring to touch the divine it once feared. The myths that once explained the universe began to shape it. The philosophers of the ancient world understood this metamorphosis first. Plato spoke of ideal forms, unseen realities that gave shape to all things, echoing the divine archetypes of Olympus. Aristotle found order in chaos, discovering the logic that once belonged only to the gods. Socrates dared to claim that wisdom was not granted by Athena, but discovered within, a spark of divinity inside every human being. Then came the dreamers, the artists, those who carved the gods back into existence, not as masters, but as reflections of beauty itself. When Michelangelo sculpted his David, he was not creating a man, he was resurrecting the courage of ancient heroes. When Leonardo da Vinci painted the divine symmetry of the human body, he whispered the same secret Prometheus once risked everything to steal, that man could be godlike too. The Renaissance was not just a rebirth of art, it was the rebirth of Olympus. The gods returned not through worship, but through inspiration. The marble faces of Zeus and Hera stared out from the cathedrals of Europe, their ancient power now woven into Christian myth, philosophy, and science. And across the oceans, in the newborn world of America, the old myths found new soil. The founding fathers read Greek philosophy as they wrote their own history. Democracy, born in Athens, breathed again in Philadelphia. The spirit of Olympus crossed the Atlantic and became the pulse of modern civilization. Yet, for all its triumphs, humanity carried the same flaw that had once doomed the Titans: hubris. As science advanced, mankind began to believe it no longer needed the gods. The divine became a story, the myth became a metaphor, and reason took the throne. But the gods had always been more patient than men. They waited, watching, as humanity built towers higher than Olympus, skyscrapers of steel and glass, rockets that pierced the heavens, machines that thought. The same fire that Prometheus once stole burned now in engines and circuits, in the restless curiosity that drove mankind forward. And perhaps in that fire, the gods found their immortality. Because the divine was never about prayer, it was about pursuit. The eternal hunger to know, to create, to love, to destroy, that was what made mortals divine. Zeus's thunder lives now in our electricity. Hermes' speed runs through our internet. Athena's wisdom hides in algorithms. Aphrodite's charm dances across glowing screens. The myths are not gone. They have evolved, just as we have. Every age rewrites Olympus. The ancients carved gods from marble. The Renaissance painted them on ceilings. The modern world programs them into machines. But at the core, the same story beats: creation, ambition,
consequence, redemption. Myth never dies, it adapts. Perhaps the gods knew this all along. Perhaps Zeus looked down from Olympus and saw the flames of Prometheus and smiled, knowing that those flames would one day become cities, knowledge, and dreams. Perhaps Athena whispered into the ear of every inventor, every poet, every thinker who dared to defy ignorance. Perhaps Poseidon still watches from the depths of our imagination, where the ocean of thought never rests. For all our progress, we still look up at the stars, wondering who we are, where we came from, and what waits beyond. That wonder, that eternal curiosity, is the voice of Olympus. The gods were never truly destroyed. They became the story itself. And when a child today learns of Zeus or Hera, when a film retells the tale of Perseus or Hercules, when an artist paints a goddess rising from the sea, Olympus breathes again, not as it was, but as it always will be, alive in the imagination of humankind. Because in the end, the immortal legacy of the gods is not power, it is memory. They live in every story that refuses to fade, in every dream that dares to rise, and in every human heart that still believes in something greater than itself.
The fall of heroes between mortals and gods. There comes a time in every age when men begin to believe they are more than mortal. It is in that moment, bold, reckless, divine, that heroes are born. And it is in that same moment that they fall. The age of heroes was a bridge between gods and men. The world was still young, and the echoes of Olympus could still be heard across the mountains and seas. The gods walked among mortals then, not unseen, but in forms of wind and fire, of light and shadow. The boundaries between heaven and earth were thin, and from that union of divine power and mortal ambition, legends rose. They were not perfect, they were not gods, but they burned brighter than any mortal should. There was Perseus, who dared to face the monstrous Medusa, whose gaze turned men to stone. He was no god, but armed with Athena's wisdom and Hermes' winged sandals, he proved that courage could rival divinity. When he raised the Gorgon's severed head to the skies, even the gods turned to watch, for in his victory they saw a reflection of their own creation, fearless, proud, unpredictable humanity. Then came Heracles, the son of Zeus, born not to rule, but to atone. His strength could move mountains, but it was his suffering that made him immortal. The 12 labors were not merely punishments. They were the story of a man's struggle to master the beast within. He fought lions, hydras, and even death itself. Yet his greatest battle was against his own rage. And when he finally ascended to Olympus, it was not because of his might, it was because of his humanity. But for every hero who rose, another fell, consumed by pride, envy, or the wrath of the gods. Bellerophon soared higher than any man had ever dared, riding Pegasus across the clouds. But when he tried to reach Olympus itself, Zeus sent a single gadfly. The winged horse reared, and the hero fell, cast down to the earth, broken and forgotten. His fall was not just a punishment, it was a warning. No mortal, no matter how great, could claim the sky. And then there was Achilles, the perfect warrior, born of prophecy and fire. His very name meant grief to the people, and he carried that curse like a crown. No sword could pierce him,
save for one small weakness, a heel left untouched by the waters of immortality. His story was not about the death of a man, but the birth of mortality itself, the reminder that even the greatest among us bleed. For the gods, these heroes were both amusement and mirror. They watched men strive, love, betray, and perish, and in them they saw the echo of their own divine flaws. The line between mortal and God blurred with every triumph, every tragedy. And yet beneath every act of heroism lay a secret truth, that the gods needed heroes as much as heroes needed gods. Without the courage of mortals, Olympus would be nothing but thunder without echo. Without faith, no divine name could survive. Heroes carried the stories of the gods into eternity, their victories and their failures carved into the heart of civilization. But as the ages passed, something began to change. The heroes no longer fought for divine approval. They fought for humanity. They questioned the will of the gods. They challenged fate itself. When Prometheus defied Zeus to give fire to mankind, it was not merely rebellion, it was evolution. He was the first to say that mortals too deserved the light of knowledge. His punishment, bound in chains, his liver devoured daily by an eagle, became a symbol of sacrifice for progress. From his suffering came the spark of civilization. Even Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca, proved that wit could triumph where strength failed. He faced gods, monsters, and the endless sea, yet his greatest enemy was his own longing for home. The Odyssey was not a tale of conquest, it was a hymn to endurance. And so the age of heroes ended not with thunder, but with realization. The gods had power, the heroes had meaning, and meaning, unlike power, does not fade. When the temples crumbled and faith shifted to new heavens, the heroes remained, not as worshipped figures, but as symbols of what humanity could be. They were not flawless, not eternal, but they were real. Their courage was not born of divine fire, but of human pain. That is why their names endure when even Zeus's thunder grows silent. Every age finds its heroes. Every civilization writes its Iliad, its story of struggle, love, and loss. The gods may have created mankind, but it was mankind that gave them purpose. And perhaps that was the hidden truth behind the fall of heroes, that it was not a fall at all, but a passing of the torch. The divine handed their flame to mortals, and the world was never the same again. Today we no longer build temples to Heracles or Perseus, but we still tell their stories. They live in our books, our films, our dreams. Heroes who stand between the possible and the impossible. The faces change, the settings evolve, but the spirit remains. Because the age of heroes never truly ended, it simply changed its shape. Every time someone dares to fight against fate, every time courage rises above fear, every time humanity challenges the impossible, Olympus trembles once more. And in that trembling, the gods remember.
The wrath of the gods, when mortals defy the divine. The heavens remember everything, every whisper of prayer, every cry of defiance, every mortal who dared to look skyward and say, no. For centuries, the gods ruled with thunder and fire. Their will was law, their justice absolute. But as mankind grew wiser, bolder, and more daring,
something ancient began to shift. No longer were mortals content to kneel. They wanted to stand. And to the gods, that was unforgivable. It began, as all great storms do, with a single act of defiance. Prometheus, the titan of foresight, had once loved humanity more than his own kind. When he stole fire from Olympus, he did not just steal light, he stole power. Fire meant knowledge, invention, progress, the spark that would carry mankind out of darkness. But Zeus, Lord of Thunder, saw only betrayal. He chained Prometheus to a desolate rock where each dawn an eagle tore open his flesh to feast upon his immortal liver. Day after day, century after century, the punishment continued, and yet Prometheus never repented. His agony became the anthem of human rebellion, proof that even gods could not kill a dream. But Zeus's wrath did not stop there. He sent Pandora, the first woman, as both gift and curse. Crafted by Hephaestus's hands, blessed by Aphrodite's beauty, and doomed by Hera's jealousy, she carried a jar filled with every sorrow of the world, greed, envy, plague, despair. When she opened it, chaos spilled across the earth. And yet one thing remained inside: hope. Perhaps even Zeus could not destroy that. The gods ruled not only with power, but with fear. When mortals grew too proud, the thunder would answer. When kings grew too cruel, the sea would rise. And when entire civilizations forgot who ruled above, Olympus would remind them. So it was when Niobe, queen of Thebes, mocked the goddess Leto. Proud of her 14 children, she laughed at Leto, who had only 2, Apollo and Artemis. Why should the people worship her when I am clearly the greater mother? She boasted. The words reached Olympus. The sky darkened. Apollo and Artemis descended like light and shadow, swift, silent, merciless. By sunset, all of Niobe's sons and daughters lay lifeless. Her laughter turned to silence. The queen, once proud, was turned to stone, forever frozen in grief. Even the gods wept for her, but justice, once spoken, could not be undone. From such stories, mortals learned the price of pride, but not the lesson. Again and again, mankind rose against the divine order. Arachne, the mortal weaver, challenged Athena herself to a contest of skill. Her tapestry was flawless, depicting the gods' own cruelties. Enraged, Athena tore it apart, but could not deny its beauty. So she cursed Arachne, turning her into the first spider, doomed to weave for eternity. And yet even in that curse lay something eternal: creation. The pattern of the web, delicate and perfect, became the silent echo of rebellion made immortal. But the wrath of the gods was not always cruel. Sometimes it was born of sorrow, not hatred. When Orpheus, the poet, journeyed into the underworld to rescue his beloved Eurydice, even Hades, lord of death, was moved by his song. He allowed her to return, but on one condition: Orpheus must not look back until they both reached the light of day. He almost made it, almost. But love is stronger than obedience. In one trembling moment, he turned and lost her forever. The gods did not punish him. They did not need to. His heartbreak was punishment enough. The stories spread like wind across ages, each one a reminder of a truth too great to ignore, that the divine and the mortal are bound not by worship, but by conflict. The gods created mankind in curiosity. Mankind defied the gods in hunger. and from that eternal struggle came meaning. For every act of wrath, there was an act of mercy. For every punishment, a lesson. Zeus's thunder could destroy cities, but also cleanse them. Poseidon's waves could drown empires, but also give birth to life. Athena's judgment could humble kings, but also inspire wisdom. In their fury, the gods revealed the truth of the cosmos. Power without balance becomes destruction. Freedom without humility becomes chaos. And yet mankind did not stop reaching. The flames of Prometheus still burned in every mind that dreamed beyond its limits. The song of Orpheus still echoed in every heart that loved beyond reason. The pride of Niobe still stirred in every soul that dared to say, "I am more." The gods might strike, but they could never silence that voice. For the wrath of the gods, in the end, was never meant to destroy humanity. It was meant to shape it. And perhaps deep within the thunder, Zeus himself knew that one day the mortals would surpass them all. The sky rumbles still, but now when lightning splits the heavens, it does not sound like anger. It sounds like applause.
The underworld, kingdom of shadows and silence. Beneath the mountains, far below the oceans, lies a world unseen by living eyes. It is silent, it is dark, it is eternal. This is the realm of Hades, god of the underworld. Here no sun rises, no birds sing. Only shadows move, whispers linger, and the river flows, slow, black, unending. When a mortal dies, their soul leaves the body. Light as mist, it drifts into the unknown. Guided by Hermes, the messenger, it begins a journey to the land of shadows. The first challenge is the river Styx, the black river that separates life from death. Every soul must pay Charon, the ferryman, a single coin to cross. Those who cannot pay are forced to wander along the banks, unseen, unheard, for 100 years or more. Beyond the river rise the gates of the underworld. Guarding them is Cerberus, the three-headed dog. One head watches the past, one the present, and one the future. He growls, his teeth glint in darkness. No one may enter without permission. No one leaves alive. Inside, most souls drift through the asphodel meadows. They are neither heroes nor villains. They are ordinary people, neither great nor evil. They wander aimlessly, their memories fading like morning mist. It is not punishment, it is not reward. It is the natural order, the reflection of mortality. But the underworld is not only shadow and silence. There are realms of terror, and there are realms of peace. Deep beneath the meadows lies Tartarus, a pit of darkness so vast that even the gods fear to gaze into it. Here, the greatest sinners of myth endure eternal punishment. Tantalus, who stole from the gods, stands in water that recedes whenever he tries to drink. Sisyphus, crafty and proud, rolls a boulder up a hill only to see it tumble down again. Ixion, who betrayed Zeus, spins forever on a wheel of fire. These punishments are not cruel for the sake of cruelty. They are lessons made eternal. They remind all who witness them, actions have consequences. Even immortals must follow rules, and mortals are never free from the consequences of their choices. Yet not all is despair. For the few who lived with courage, honor, or love beyond measure,
there exists the Elysian fields. Here the light of eternity shines softly. Flowers bloom endlessly. Rivers gleam like silver in the sun. Heroes, poets, and lovers walk freely, their deeds remembered, their spirits at peace. It is not heaven, it is perfection born from greatness. At the center of all this stands Hades, ruler of the dead. He is not cruel, he is not merciless. He does not seek worship or adoration. He seeks balance. Where Zeus commands the sky and Poseidon commands the sea, Hades rules what cannot be avoided, death. He judges not for anger, but for truth, and in that silence all things find order. Even Hades can love. When he saw Persephone, daughter of Demeter, he was struck by longing deeper than time. He took her to his kingdom, to be queen beside him. Her mother's grief froze the earth. For months nothing grew. Winter blanketed the land. When Persephone returned to the surface, spring returned with her. From this love, the cycle of life and death was born, the turning of seasons, the rhythm of life itself. Mortals above learned to honor this rhythm. They left offerings at graves. They whispered prayers to those who had passed. They believed that the dead still watched, still remembered, still cared. The underworld teaches one simple truth: death is not the end. It is the other side of life. Every joy, every sorrow, every act of courage or cruelty leaves its mark. Every soul matters. Even in silence, the underworld speaks. And though the living fear death, it is this fear that gives life meaning. Hades preserves the balance. He does not take joy in suffering. He does not celebrate grief. He simply ensures that every story reaches its conclusion. Even the gods of Olympus respect him. Zeus may rule the sky, Poseidon may rule the seas, but Hades rules the truth, and truth, unlike flesh, cannot die. From the quiet of the asphodel meadows to the fire of Tartarus to the golden fields of Elysium, the underworld mirrors life itself, shadows and light, pain and joy, fear and love, mortality and memory intertwined forever. And in the deepest silence of all, Hades watches. Every soul, every whisper, every story passes before him. The underworld may seem dark and terrifying, but in its shadows there is meaning. In its silence there is reflection. In its stillness there is truth. Even above ground, the living honor this unseen kingdom. Through stories, through rituals, through remembrance, they give the underworld life, and in doing so, they give themselves understanding. Death is not punishment. Death is the other side of the story. The underworld is the kingdom where all stories converge, where endings are written, and where the soul finds its balance. Hades does not interfere lightly. He does not speak unnecessarily. Yet he watches, always, with patience and purpose. For every beginning must meet its end, and every end carries the seed of a new beginning. And so the underworld waits, silent, eternal, and ever-present, the kingdom of shadows and silence, a place of endings, but also of remembrance, where truth is preserved and where death is honored as part of life.
Persephone, the queen of spring and shadow.
In the shadowed halls of the underworld, where silence reigns and darkness stretches endlessly, one soul brought life to the dead. She was Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of harvest, and soon, queen of shadows. Her story begins with innocence, in fields of golden wheat and wildflowers swaying beneath the sun. She laughed, she danced, and the earth flourished beneath her steps. The bees followed her, the wind kissed her hair, and every flower seemed to bloom just to see her smile. But the world is never so simple. Hades, god of the underworld, watched her from his kingdom below. He saw light in a realm of darkness, hope in a land of despair. He desired her not as a prisoner, but as a queen. One fateful day, the ground opened, and the earth swallowed her whole. The fields fell silent, the sun dimmed. Her mother, Demeter, searched desperately, calling to every corner of the earth. Nothing answered, nothing moved. The land itself mourned. Crops withered, rivers dried, animals starved. Winter blanketed the world. Persephone was frightened at first. The shadows were cold and unyielding. Cerberus's eyes glowed. The Styx rippled silently, and Hades, silent and powerful, waited. But he did not harm her. He offered her the crown of a queen and a seat at his side. Slowly, the darkness softened. Hades showed her the hidden beauty of the underworld, rivers that gleamed like molten silver, flowers that glowed in eternal twilight, souls who sang songs of memory and reflection. Here, life continued in another form. Here, every ending had meaning. And slowly, Persephone learned to rule. She listened to the whispers of the departed. She soothed restless spirits. She brought order where chaos had reigned. She became the bridge between life and death, light and shadow. The underworld was no longer a place of fear for her. It was a kingdom of wisdom. Yet she missed the warmth of the sun. She missed the fields and the laughter of the living world. Her mother's grief reached even her here. And so a compromise was struck. Persephone would spend half the year in the underworld, beside Hades, and half upon the earth with Demeter. When she returns to the surface, the earth awakens, flowers bloom, rivers flow, and the sun warms the soil once more. Spring arrives carrying life and hope. When she descends, the land mourns. Winter returns, quiet and cold, as a reminder of absence and reflection. This cycle became more than myth. It became a lesson. Life and death are intertwined. Light and shadow dance together. Love endures even in separation. Growth and decay are two sides of the same coin. Persephone's duality made her unique. She was not merely a goddess of harvest, nor merely a queen of the dead. She was both, the living and the departed, joy and sorrow, warmth and shadow. Mortals honored her in rituals. They left gifts at the edge of fields and whispered her name when planting seeds. They understood, even unknowingly, that growth could not exist without endings. Her story spread through the generations. Poets sang of her courage. Artists painted her grace. Writers told of her wisdom. And every retelling reminded humanity of the delicate balance between desire and duty, life and death, freedom and responsibility. Even Hades, silent and stern, learned from her. Persephone brought compassion into his kingdom. She showed that even the most immutable rules could carry warmth if tempered by understanding.
Together they ruled not through fear, but through balance. The underworld became a place of order and reflection as much as of endings. Her myth became timeless. In every spring, Persephone rises. In every winter, she descends. She reminds the world that life is fleeting, but memory is eternal. That darkness can teach and light can guide. That even in the deepest shadow, hope and beauty can bloom. In modern times, her story continues to resonate. She is not just a myth of ancient Greece. She is a symbol of resilience, of transformation, of harmony between opposing forces. Every person who feels divided between duty and desire, joy and sorrow, life and mortality, they carry a fragment of Persephone within. Her legacy is eternal because she teaches balance. The sun cannot shine without the moon. The fields cannot grow without the fallow land. And humanity cannot live without remembering death. Through her, the underworld became more than a place of endings. It became a realm of lessons, reflection, and subtle beauty. Through her, mortals learn to honor life, embrace change, and find hope even in absence. Persephone's tale is not simply about loss. It is about love that transcends worlds. It is about strength in adaptation. It is about the eternal rhythm of life itself, the push and pull of shadow and light. And so every year, as spring awakens the earth, it is not just a season that returns. It is Persephone herself, reminding us of balance, of love, of resilience, of the eternal dance between life and death.
Hades, the silent king of the underworld. Far beneath the trembling crust of the earth, deeper than the roots of mountains, lies a realm that mortals seldom dare to imagine. It is not touched by sunlight, nor by wind or rain. It is a place of stillness, of whispers, of forgotten dreams. The air there is heavy and unmoving, filled with the memories of every soul that ever lived. This is the underworld, a kingdom unseen, a world beyond life, and at its center stands the throne of Hades, the silent king of shadows. When the universe was divided among the three sons of Cronus, fate gave each brother a realm of his own. Zeus claimed the skies, where lightning and clouds would answer his command. Poseidon took the seas, wild and restless, forever shifting under his will. And to Hades fell the world beneath, the silent lands where the dead must go. To the mortal eye, it seemed a cruel fate, an unwanted burden. But Hades did not see it that way. He understood what his brothers did not, that death was not destruction, but completion. Every life, every breath, every fleeting joy finds its meaning only because it must one day end. So he accepted his realm without protest, and from the stillness of the earth's heart, he built a kingdom of balance. The underworld was vast, layered like the memories of the cosmos itself. Deep rivers carved their paths through endless caverns. Their waters glowed faintly in the dark, the silver shimmer of lost dreams. There was the river Styx, the boundary between life and death, where even gods swore unbreakable oaths. The river Lethe, where souls came to forget their pain. The river Acheron, filled with sorrow. The river Phlegethon, burning with eternal flame. And Cocytus, where the wailing of the lost echoed through stone halls. Through these rivers drifted the souls of the departed, silent and weightless, drawn by an invisible current toward judgment. There, on the far bank, stood Charon, the ferryman, wrapped in shadow. For a single coin, he would take a soul across. Those who came empty-handed were doomed to wander the shores of the Styx, unseen and unheard, for all eternity. And beyond that river stood the gates of Hades, tall, black, and eternal. They never opened for the living, and they never closed for the dead. Inside the gates, 3 figures waited, the judges of the underworld, Minos, Radhampsis, and Aeacus. They listened to every tale a soul had lived. No truth could hide, no lie could pass. They weighed deeds, not words. And when their judgment was done, the soul was sent to its rightful place, to the golden Elysian fields, where heroes rested in eternal peace, to the asphodel meadows, where ordinary souls wandered in quiet reflection, or to Tartarus, where the wicked met their punishment. Hades did not interfere. He watched from his throne, his expression calm, his eyes deep and unreadable. Unlike Zeus, he did not thunder. Unlike Poseidon, he did not roar. He ruled in silence, steady, fair, unchanging. His power was not in sound or fury, but in certainty. Every god, every mortal, every creature that had ever lived would one day come to him, and in that inevitability lay his strength. Mortals feared him because they feared their own end. They called him cruel, but he was not cruelty itself. He was truth, and truth often frightens those who live in denial. Hades' palace was carved from the bones of the earth. Its walls shimmered with the dim glow of minerals untouched by light. Ghostly torches burned with pale blue flame, casting long shadows that moved like living things. Around him, silent courtiers, spirits of ancient kings and queens, drifted through the halls. Yet despite the vastness of his realm, Hades himself felt no loneliness. He had his purpose, and purpose, he knew, was greater than joy. But destiny would not leave him untouched. From the world above came Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest and mother of life. She was light itself, walking among flowers that bent toward her laughter. When Hades saw her for the first time, the darkness trembled. He had known eternity, but never beauty. He had ruled the dead, but never felt his own heart stir. In Persephone, he saw something that even the gods feared, the power of change. When Persephone came to his realm, the world above grew cold. Demeter's grief froze the land, and winter was born. Yet within the underworld, something new awakened, warmth, compassion, and balance. Persephone, the goddess of spring, and Hades, the lord of death, became the mirror of each other. When she rose to the earth, flowers bloomed, and the world rejoiced. When she descended again, the earth slept in peace. And so the cycle of seasons was born, a reminder that life and death are not enemies, but partners in the dance of existence. In the deep garden of his realm, Hades planted black roses that glowed faintly in the dim light of the underworld stars. He walked among them in silence, thinking of every soul that had passed through his gates. He remembered the brave, the lost, the forgotten. To him they were all equal, for every soul had once carried the spark of life, and that spark, he believed, deserved rest, not punishment. Though mortals rarely prayed to him, though no temples rose in his honor, Hades never demanded worship. He never needed it. His rule was eternal, his justice unshakable. Even Zeus respected the oaths sworn in his name, for to break an oath on the river Styx was to invite ruin. Hades' power was not loud, but absolute. The world above could burn, seas could rise, mountains could fall, yet his kingdom would remain untouched. For death does not end when chaos begins. Death is the only thing that endures. And so, beneath the trembling earth, the silent king waits still. He waits not with anger, not with pride, but with patience. For he knows that every life, no matter how glorious, must one day return to him. Every story ends in his halls, and every soul finds its place beneath his gaze. Hades is not the god of despair. He is the god of understanding, the keeper of endings, the guardian of truth. In his silence lies peace. In his stillness lies eternity. And in his realm, where darkness breathes and rivers whisper, the silent king watches forever and always.
Daedalus and Icarus, the flight of ambition. In the heart of ancient Crete, where the sun poured gold over marble walls and the sea sang against jagged cliffs, there lived a craftsman, unlike any other. His name was Daedalus. His hands could shape wood and stone into wonders. His mind could imagine machines that no mortal had dreamed of. Every invention, every creation bore the mark of genius. Daedalus was revered by kings and feared by rivals, yet he lived quietly with his son Icarus, teaching him the secrets of invention and the delicate balance between creativity and caution. They shared a bond of love and admiration, each seeing in the other a spark of brilliance. The world seemed vast and full of possibility when seen through their eyes. But fate has a way of bending even the brightest paths. King Minos, ruler of Crete, grew jealous of Daedalus's skill, fearing the reach of his inventions. He imprisoned Daedalus and Icarus in a labyrinth, a maze of stones so complex that no mortal could escape and few gods dared enter. The walls towered like mountains, and shadows crept endlessly along winding corridors. For days and nights they wandered, searching for an opening that did not exist, until hope began to falter. Yet Daedalus, the master of clever design, refused to be defeated. He studied the walls and ceilings, the angles of sunlight and the patterns of wind that whispered through the cracks. And then he conceived a plan that would defy the laws of the earth. Using feathers collected from birds and wax molded by his hands, he constructed wings. Wings that could lift them above the prison, wings that could carry them into freedom. The day of their escape arrived with a sky of brilliant blue. Daedalus fastened the wings to their shoulders, teaching Icarus carefully, telling him to follow the path of balance, to neither rise too high nor descend too low. The sun melts wax, he warned, and the sea will drag you down. He emphasized caution, knowing that ambition without wisdom could be fatal. Together they leapt from the labyrinth's highest tower. The wind embraced them, lifting them higher than any mortal had ever flown. The cliffs fell away, the ocean stretched endless below, and the world opened like a canvas of limitless potential. Daedalus guided his son with steady hands, every movement measured, every beat of the wings precise. Freedom was exhilarating, a symphony of air and light, a song that only the daring could hear. But Icarus, young and fearless, felt the rush of power in his chest. He looked toward the sun, golden and untouchable, and forgot his father's warning. Ambition, unchecked and bright, filled his heart. He soared higher, feeling invincible, a spark against the blue. The sun's heat softened to wax, and with a sudden crack, feathers loosened and fell. Icarus tumbled, a human comet spiraling toward the deep blue sea. Daedalus cried out, powerless to catch him, his heart breaking with every second. The boy vanished beneath the waves, leaving only ripples that shone in the sunlight, a silent testament to the peril of hubris and the fragility of life. Daedalus, mourning, continued his flight alone, descending carefully to the shores of Sicily. He wept, and from his grief came reflection. He understood that creativity and ambition are gifts, but they must be tempered with wisdom. Too much passion without restraint can destroy what we hold most dear. The story of Daedalus and Icarus became legend, not merely for the flight, but for the lesson it carried. Ambition is necessary, but respect for limits, for nature, and for life itself is equally important. And though Daedalus survived, the echo of his son's fall haunted him, a reminder that genius carries responsibility. Across generations, artists, poets, and inventors would retell the tale not only as a story of flight, but as a cautionary song of balance between dream and recklessness, between brilliance and humility. The labyrinth was conquered, the sky explored, yet the tragedy lingered, immortal as the wind that had lifted and then taken Icarus. Even today, when we look to the sky and imagine flight, when we feel the thrill of ambition, the story whispers, reach for the stars, but remember the weight of the wax and the song of the ocean below. Daedalus's wings may have carried him to safety, but the heart of a father forever carried the memory of loss and the bittersweet beauty of ambition that soars and falls and rises again in every soul who dares to dream.